Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of Sagionic 1027. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. And with us, we have another one of those amazing guests. And you may be saying, let's get out the professional microphone here. How is it that she keeps meeting these people? Well, I know people who know people who know people. And if I know the person who refers me and they're an upright, follower of the king, then I know who they know are also um, walking in ways that are honoring the Father of the entire universe. So today, my guest with us is Robert Fukui, and he and his lovely bride dwell in sunny Southern Cal or Mid California, right?
No,
Or
Southern
is it
California.
okay?
Yep, Pasadena,
Okay,
Pasadena. Yep.
sunny. At what point does it become southern? I wonder.
It's probably when you pass the Grapevine,
Okay,
because
okay.
there's a mountain range that
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
cuts
yeah,
off
yeah.
Central Valley to Southern California.
And that's where Magic Mountain is, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
okay, okay. So I didn't know that. I didn't know what divided it. Okay, so he and his
I just kind of made
lovely,
that up, but it made sense because the Central Valley is
yeah,
kind of rimmed by mountains, right? And so once you
yeah.
come over the Grapevine, there's really nothing until you hit Magic Mountain,
That's
and
right.
then
That's right.
pretty much.
Okay, so now I know. And GI Joe
Mm-hmm,
says knowing is half the battle.
yep.
Okay, so we all had an opportunity to meet his lovely bride within this last week, Kay Lee Fukui. And this couple is amazing. But now we get to peer into, Robert and what it is that the Lord has called each of them to steward in business, in life, in community, in family, whatever it is. So, Robert, welcome to our broadcast today. We're really excited for our viewers to hear of you as a carrier of wisdom.
Oh, thanks, Sean, and thanks for reaching out. And it was fun, when I was trying to check you out before I responded to your email request. I was like, okay, who is this? And then, of course, you interviewed Patrice, who I served on his board for about 10 years.
Yeah.
But then also, as I was going through your YouTube channel, I came across this interview you had with Bonnie Cow, who goes to church with us.
Yeah, I love
And
it.
I'm like, how does she know Bonnie? So I said, okay, she's got to be okay. I know Bonnie and
Yeah.
know Patrice. And so, yeah, for sure. It carried some weight. So
Yeah.
thanks
Well, that's
for
that's
reaching
good.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. I had somebody reach out to me and who I was going to interview, but his wife was concerned that maybe I was new age because of my painting. But if
Oh, yeah.
anybody is to hone in on my painting, you've got the tomb, you've got the cross of Calvary, and right here
Mm-hmm.
I happen to try to cover Golgotha, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the heel of Golgotha right there, the skull.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that was where Jesus went to die upon the cross. You got this is Rahab, right here. This is Rahab, and there's so much spiritual symbolism in there.
Yeah.
And when I went to start this broadcast, I'm like, I actually I did my first one. I didn't like it, and I'm like, Lord, why don't I like it? I don't like the background. I don't like anything about it. And he goes, Sean, what do you have that nobody else in the world has? And I'm like, okay, let me think, Lord. And it was my masterpiece painting by my brother.
Oh, that's
And
your
so
brother.
I'm like,
That great.
okay. And it's the size of a door
I mean,
frame, so it's massive.
oh yeah, it looks big. Well,
Yeah.
it's not. It reminds me a lot of the Sistine Chapel.
Yes. Yes.
It's got the blue background. Of course, the blue is the base, and then you've got all these images, and it depicts a story. And
That's
so,
right. That's
yeah,
right. So if we think a story, right? Let's get out this professional microphone. What is the storyline of your life, Robert Fukui?
well, it's still evolving.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always a big thing. Well, start from the beginning. So I'm
Okay.
a pastor's kid, and so my dad was a pastor in Hawaii. He was raised. Both my parents were raised in Hawaii. I was born in Hawaii, and when I was about 9 years old, we left there. My dad felt called to really go to Washington State, and that's where he went to Bible college. But as he, so he, my mom and my sister and I, we stayed back in Hawaii until my dad kind of scouted the land, so to speak. And so on his way to Washington, he stopped in San Jose, California to visit some friends, and then he never left. He decided, oh, this is the place we're gonna land. So then we came out to San Jose, and so I really grew up in the Bay Area. And then, my first encounter with the Lord, my own personal experience was I had my own Samuel moment where the Lord woke me up out of bed with the audible voice, heard the audible voice of the Lord. I thought it was my mom, and because I'm pretty sure he said Bobby, which my mom was the only one that called me Bobby. And so I woke up and went to my parents' bedroom, but the door is open and they're fast asleep. And so I'm like, okay. So I went back to bed. And then again, for a few moments later, I heard him call me, and I woke up and I said, oh, okay, I think I know the story. and so I said, speak, Lord, for I'm listening. And he shared something. I can't tell you what. Lesson to all you folks listening, when the Lord wakes you up out of bed in the middle of the night, get up. No, yeah, we're right. Yeah. And get up. Don't stay in bed. So I stayed laying down. And so basically I fell back asleep. And so I may be the first person in history that fell asleep on the Lord, right? As he's talking to you. I mean, you figure most people would be like so excited and like, oh my gosh. And here I am like, oh, and all I heard was, you remember, Charlie Brown, the Peanuts characters. And whenever an adult's speaking, all you hear is wah, 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 wah. So that's what I remember. So, my mom said, I know whatever he said is ingrained in your spirit. And so there it is. And so, yeah, grew up there. And one thing I knew I didn't want to be was a pastor. So, because as my dad says, sheep bite. And so, a lot of people sometimes think, being in ministry is great, is glamorous, but you deal a lot of issues, and I didn't want to have to deal with those. And so I went into business. I don't know if it's any much better, but I think it is better in some ways. That I think the expectations, in business, customers have expectations, but as a pastor, the customers have a lot higher expectations. I mean, they're putting you up the pedestal like God, basically, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's higher expectations, not, appreciating the fact that pastors are human and they're going to make mistakes and they're not going to be perfect. But you get blasted, as a pastor. So when you make the smallest of mistakes and all that. So anyways, majored in business and fell in love with marketing. And that's kind of where I just kind of landed, and my whole career was in marketing and sales, worked for Coca-Cola and then two big pharmaceutical companies. And there we go. And then about 6 years ago, felt called to leave that and just consult with small family business. And along the way, my wife came along with me, and, you'll hear more of that when you interview us next week. But so now my wife and I get to consult with family business. Specifically, we like to really help married entrepreneurs navigate home and business, really work-life balance, both in business. I think not just business, but business, even ministry. My dad faced it too. And even people in careers, there's just a lack of balance in their lives. And I think a lot of that stems to the fact that we're brought up that our success is based on our achievements, not about relationships. And so because of that, whatever we define success at, that's where we're going to focus our time. And inevitably, because relationships aren't usually in the top of the success, in the success ladder, that inevitably your relationships take a back seat. And you hear this all the time, especially in entrepreneurship. You're going to sacrifice your personal time. You don't think you're going to have a life for the first 3 to 5 years or whatever, and this, that, and the other thing. And I fell in that same trap too. But so that's a little snippet of my journey a little bit.
Okay, so what would you say? Let's say there are families, and just because I'm a parent, I have to put it in that category. Let's say there are parents who spent too much time climbing the corporate ladder, or their focus was on money because that was the need, right? And then as time progressed forward, new wisdom, insight came to them. What would you say to those people now?
Now, as they have the wisdom to kind of
Yes.
scale back.
Yeah. Now is it, what would you recommend for them to do now? What would be a step they could begin now in their lives?
Well, the first thing is you align your priorities, God, family, and then your finance, or I say faith, family, finance, and finance incorporates your business, your career, ministry, any place of income or investing, whatever, right? So it's faith, family, finance. That's the priority in order.
Okay.
Right. And so that's where you got to start to ask yourself, are my priorities in line? Are my actions in alignment with my priorities, what I say my priorities are, right? So I think your listeners would agree, right? It's faith, family, and finance. But in action, if I look at the calendar, if I look at your calendar, what does that look like? Does your calendar reflect your priorities? And so the rub or the tension is, to make money, to succeed in my career or business, we got to put all this time and focus into it. And if you're doing it that way, that means you're doing it all in your own power, not with God. So because of the audience you have, and I can speak freely about this, you should understand, is God owns everything. He wants the best for you in all areas of life, including your finance. And how much do you rely on God in the everyday with the cards of finance? Because what's happened is we're doing everything on our own power and strength, which means there's no room for God to work. So really, if you really say your priorities are faith and family, and then your finance, is your faith demonstrating that? Can I say, okay, I'm going to make sure first thing in the morning I'm going to pray and read the word, get in the word, and then have my quiet time with my family and my wife or my spouse, and then trust the fact that the time I have left, God is going to help me succeed in those areas.
That's
So
right.
that's the tension though we'll have.
Yeah. Because if we think of it, I love Proverbs chapter 28. In Proverbs, that the very end part of Proverbs chapter 28, it says, "Be sure to know the condition of your flock," right? And then
Yeah.
it breaks it all down, right? Um, and it says, it also says God's wisdom is foolishness to the world, right? So
Yep.
if we look at the gauge, right? On, I could say, like my husband, he had a dad who worked so hard and had 5 kids, but there was no relationship, right?
Yep.
So
Right.
what did, and but we can redeem time, right?
Mhm.
So how would you, and I love how it's like, hold on. Oh no, he didn't just call us to the carpet. Like, what does our calendar say? Right? No, like literally, right? And I love how you say action, right? Because your calendar is going to determine your action
Absolutely.
if you're a person of your word, right?
Absolutely.
And not only that, but can you talk a little bit about because the Lord's really been in showing me that as a society, as a nation, as a world in general, we're not taught mental mind management, right?
Right.
Because okay, your dad was a pastor, right? And but mental mind management, you could be in the midst of your family, but because your mind is everywhere else associated with business, you're not there. So can you talk a little bit about that, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, everything comes from experience too, right? So I'm not just calling people out, saying that I'm perfect and I grew up this way. Yeah, you're not present, right?
Yeah.
You're there physically, but you're not present. So when I was transitioning from my corporate life and pharmaceutical sales into consulting, so I started building my consulting practice on the side, which meant I still have my obligation to my employer, right? So I'm working during the day, and then the only time to really build consulting was in the evenings or weekends. And so I didn't want to work weekends. I wanted to make sure, I told my wife, I told Kay Lee, I said, I'm not going to work weekends. But that meant nights, right? And so what happened was I would work after dinner. Go to my office and start working some more. And it got to a point where it was like 2 a.m., bedtimes were pretty common. And so you can do that for a little bit, but by the time Friday hit, I'm wiped out. And so Saturday morning comes, I wake up, take the dog for a walk, have a little breakfast, and I just look at that couch and go, man, that looks good. I just want to sit there, I just want to lay down and take a nap. And so that was I wasn't present. I wasn't working Saturdays and Sundays, but I was wiped. And so it got to that point where, and my wife grew up in an entrepreneurial home and family and generations, multiple generations. And so she accepted that fact. She said, okay, I know it's just for a season. And so I said, okay, thank you. And so, I was okay with it. But then even got to the point, I was sitting here at my desk right here, and it was, almost 2 a.m. And I'm sitting here going, what am I doing? Like, yeah, I have my wife's blessing to work this late, to work this hard, and be wiped out, not be fun to be with on weekends. But I'm thinking, is this God's best? That even when we're working to achieve something, and yeah, I have my obligation to my employer. You can't get around that. So I had to work on nights and or weekends. But then I said, well, what if I got to bed by 11 instead of 2 a.m.? So I really started questioning everything I was doing. And I'm thinking, okay, this isn't God's best. Nowhere in scripture does it say you shouldn't have a life with your spouse and your family, right? No, there wasn't any carve outs of periods of time. If you're going to build your business, and it's okay to disregard your family, right? There's nothing in there that ever says that. And so I just said, okay, Lord, this isn't your best. I know this isn't fair to Kaylee. It's also not fair to me. I'm not feeling good by the time weekend hits. I'm not feeling good. It's definitely not fair to my wife. And so I don't believe this is your best. So how do I do this differently? How do I do this better? Because we grew up, it's always about time, right? It's always, we got to put more time in. We got to put more time in. We got to put more time in. And you hear this from these business gurus a lot of time. You just got to put more time in. Just got to put more time in. The solution to everything is just to put more time in. And I'm like, no, that's craziness. Everybody's talking about how busy they are. And then I'm like, well, that's not the same as productive. Right. So how to be more productive so that I can get the same amount of time, same amount of things done, or even more with a short amount of time.
That's right.
And that's where actually innovation happens, is when you actually put boundaries, because we all operate in boundaries, but as we start to create some boundaries, then we figure out how do we get stuff done within those limitations.
That's right.
And that's where the innovation happens. And so I basically called out God in a certain way, in a friendly way. I said, okay, I want to get to bed by 11. How do we do this better? And that's when I had to start to reevaluate what I was doing and how much of the activities I was doing at my desk was actually really productive, or was it just busy work? Because I think we get consumed with being busy. I mean, how you ask people, how are you doing? And most people say, I'm busy. And I started falling into that same trap where, because I wasn't responding that way, so I almost felt guilty that I wasn't busy. So I started saying I'm busy too when people ask me how I'm doing. And then next thing I know, I'm living it out, as I'm doing my business. I'm like, I felt, it's almost like that word of busy. It's like you have to fulfill that obligation to yourself of being busy, and you just start adding stuff to your plate.
The Lord just gave me an acronym. OMG. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness sakes. Oh, this is so powerful. Busy. Being under Satan's yoke.
Oh, wow. That's good. That's a good one. That'll preach.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. That's to the bloodline of the pastors in your family, Robert.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely. We become bondage. Society's become bondage to being busy. It's like a badge of honor. Yet it's a 4-letter word, and we should treat it as such. Is that you don't want to be busy. You want to avoid that. And you see it all over. You see it, in ministry. You see it people in careers, and that's my thing. I mentor these group of young entrepreneurs, and I preach that all the time. I said, don't be busy. I'm like, and it's interesting, when you're younger and you have all the energy, you just be busy, busy, busy. As we age, hopefully you get a little bit smarter. And they say, reason why your best earning years are in your 50s and 60s is because you got a lot more wisdom.
That's right.
Right. Because of the experiences. And you do a lot of them start to work smarter, not harder.
That's right.
They're like, I'm not young like that anymore. I got to do things differently. Right. So I'm preaching to the younger folks is let's start working smarter now.
That's right.
Because you can accomplish so much more by the time you're 50s and 60s. But if you just go do the busy route, yeah, you'll accomplish things, but not as much as if you just pause a little moment and say, how do I do this better? And question everything that you do.
Yeah. And actually, when you referred to that last day that you spent 2 a.m., that last day, I heard, Bobby, like the Lord was shaking up the environment to get you to ask him. Because it says perfect wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, like ingested, right? Full of mercy and good fruits, right? Without partiality and without hypocrisy, right? So when you literally go back to the basic, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and righteousness just means to be in right standing or right relationship with the Father, right? Which is priority. God's not going to tell anyone, where's my microphone? It is my will, even for good things. It is my will that I want you to be over at that local church 5 days a week. Your family should understand. He's not going to tell you that, because that would be out of alignment, right? So share with viewers how, when you chose to allow his alignment to function in your home, what changed in your business, in your relationships, and then ultimately in the career?
Well, it was shortly after that I left my corporate job. And, what's interesting is almost 2 years before that, I thought I was going to leave the corporate job. I was doing the consulting on the side for a number of years.
Okay.
And 2 years before I actually finally left, I thought I was going to leave. And I had a date in mind, January 1st of, I forgot what year it was. But I was asking the Lord for a sign. I was putting on a fleece. So I need a sign to, yes or no, because this is a big move, leaving the comfortness of salary and bonus and company cars and all the benefits and trips and all that kind of stuff to go do your own thing, and everything falls on you. Right. So I wanted to be sure. Long story short, there's two clear signs that I was supposed to stay. And I sought counsel, my wife and my pastor. There's two clear signs that I was supposed to stay. And so I was kind of bummed out about that, because I really wanted to leave. But looking back, I needed those extra 2 years for a number of things, and including, the story I just shared about working better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was the crux. I mean, that's kind of the crux of what we do now as we consult with businesses now, is working better. And so you can have a life as you're building this business, right? And so, and that didn't happen till closer to when I finally did leave. And so I definitely need those 2 years, not just for that. There's a number of things I can go into, but I don't have time. But, just that alone is, how do I start create boundaries around my life, my business, so I can have a life and enjoy it, and even still build a bigger and better business than if I was just working 24/7, because there's a lot of data and science around the fact that working longer hours is not beneficial, that there is a point of diminishing return. And yet the data's out there, the research is out there, yet people just keep working. In fact, Henry Ford is probably in the modern era, was one of the first people that actually did a formal survey or study with his own factory to look at the people that worked 40 hours a week versus 50 or more. Was there a difference? And he found there wasn't. That the people that worked 50 hours a week or more gave no extra productivity than those that worked 40 or less. So as a business owner, right, he's thinking, well, economically, that's dumb. I'm paying people more for no additional gain. So that's where he created the 40-hour work week. And he's they deem him in a lot of ways responsible for pushing that forward, because what happened was, now his employees are now working 40 hours a week. He actually increased their wages double. And so they got a lot of productivity. A lot of people were, all the best of the best in the automotive industry were coming to him, because, this is Detroit. So all the car manufacturers are right there, and word gets out. So guess what? He gets to pick the litter of the best and the best. So his productivity goes up even more, because now he's got the best workers. And the reason why he was able to double the wages of his employees was because he revolutionized the assembly line so that he could be more productive in the same amount of time. So instead of before he revolutionized the production line, it took about a week, 5 days to build a chassis of a car.
Okay.
With the new production line, it took 1 day. So basically cut it down by 80%. So productivity goes up, cost goes down. And so now he can actually lower the price of a car so that the average person can afford it. And that was one of his goals. That was one of his visions, to build a car that the everyday person, including his factory workers, can afford. And so so he created that boundary, right? Price. I want to bring the price down to here. So how do I do that? right?
That's
So which
right.
means you got to be more productive.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so brought the cost down, increased wages by twice the industry average, and it forced the industry to follow suit because why? They're losing all the good workers. And so that limitation that he created revolutionized the industry, and the car industry is not the same sense because it opened the doors for more people in the country to be able to afford a car, and it just the automotive, the era of cars just exploded, right, because of that. So anyways, kind of went off tangent there.
No,
but
no, no,
but
you didn't. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. And let me tell you why you did it. You did not. I love the pre-conversations that wind up taking place. But if I want you to think of the rising of, okay, the principles involved in the rising of, and the draw that it's going to do, you did not go off on a tangent at all. That is so powerful. Oh my gosh. So think of this, okay? If you were to talk, because you have access to people globally here, okay? The furthest I've interviewed people in Australia, and I've interviewed people in Nairobi, okay? So you get the global spectrum here, okay? What are your thoughts on that within the geographical setting you're located, there's business there now?
mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, how would you speak to leaders or entrepreneur minds, right, who started out with lemonade stand, right, or let's make a hairpiece, right? How would you speak into their lives that right now, where they are geographically positioned, there's a business right there where they are?
Mm-hmm.
That over here in this neck of the woods, they're more blessed than we are, and the falsehood behind that, right? Speak to business minds, Robert.
Yeah, good. Because I'm glad you added that last part, because that was a broad question at first. But that last part about, we get into comparison mode a lot of times, and we focus so much on what we don't have and overlooked what we do have. And so, the person that's jealous about, oh, this person is, they started with more capital, or they came from money so they can start this business. And I have just this little thing. I just have an idea, or this one hair piece. And how do I make a business out of this? I need more money. I need to go get a loan. I need to get investors, which is a very common thing that I hear out there. And first of all, people think that getting a bank loan or getting investors is like the path to success, right? The success rate is not any better if you get outside capital versus if you bootstrap it from your own. The success rate's the same. I mean, if you look at investors, seasoned investors, okay, they're banking on the fact that just 10% of their investments, right? 10% of the business they invest in are going to make it big. So that recoup all the other losses. So the other 50% of their business they invest into usually go bank belly up, because the failure rate is about 50% in 5 years. And then the other 30 to 40%, they marginally do okay. They do okay, and they provide a little bit of return, but not to recoup all the losses from the other 50%, right? But it's that 10% is what makes it for them. And so really, if you get an investor, they're just hoping you're one of that 10%. But to really dig into the kind of the jealousy or comparison thing, the one, that's a dangerous game. You don't covet your neighbors, because that's a 10 commandment, right? Yeah. But when you look at the parable of the talent, right, the master, it's always it's a metaphor of who God is. And so the master gives 3 of his servants different amounts of talents, right? 5, 2, and 1. And it says each according to their ability. And so I always, I remember when I was old enough to kind of really look at this going, man, that's odd. Why does he give the servants 3 different amounts? I mean, that doesn't seem fair, right? I mean, this goes to what you just said. That's not fair. I only got 1 talent, or I only got 2 talents. This other guy got 5. Yet, so the first 2 servants, right, they invested their talents. And the one that got 5 more, so doubled his money. The one that had 2 also got 2 back, so he doubled his money. So they invested it. And then the master's reward to both of them were the same, even though they started with different amounts, right? And so when it comes to the, it's not fair kind of thing, it's just like the master in the parable of the talent. God gives you what you need based on your ability. So which means now it's up to you to prove you can do more so he can bless you. So the servant that got the one talent, he was afraid. So he just buried it in the sand, and he didn't lose any money, but he didn't gain any money. And the master was furious. And so he took it from him and then gave it to the other one, the one that got 5, or ended up with 10, right? And so he's like, why trust you with this if you're not going to do anything? You could have even put in a savings account. So my guess too is even if he would have just put in a savings account at 0.5% interest, that he still would have been pleased and blessed him. And so the kind of the moral of the story is, number one, you've got what you need based on your ability. Now you got to prove to the Lord that you can steward it well and you can multiply that. And then as you multiply it, obviously you bless yourself by being good with your money and just taking that one hair piece, sell it for a profit so you can make 5 more and then sell more, right? You just keep turning it around as long as you make a profit out of it. Now you can reinvest and then have more inventory. But when you start to bless yourself by investing and use your money wisely and doing business wisely, then God piles onto it, right? So too many times we wait for the blessing to move forward when God's waiting for you to move forward so he can bless you.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive to even Christians, yet it's already in the Bible. Because you already talked about, God's ways are not our ways. The things of God seem foolish. So what I'm sharing with you, and just good practice, whether it's with investing or your business or whatever, it's very counterintuitive to the average person. So whether it's in business, even making money and investing, the reason why people don't invest well, because it's very counterintuitive to what they think it takes to build wealth. So anyways, all to say is to your question is the parable of the talent is a great lesson. And if you start getting in the comparison game, it's like, don't look at what you don't have, look at what you do have and ask yourself, how can I multiply that? Because when I do, God's going to bless that. So instead of waiting for the financial breakthrough, it's why don't you just take some action, even if it's imperfect, because God's going to bless it. Because my guess is even if the servant that had one talent, even if he invested it, but he lost it, I think the master still would have given him another chance.
Absolutely. And so that goes down to this. Though a righteous man falls, he will rise again.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So now pause there for a second because I want to go back to something you said. Okay. We're going to go back a little further. So when you were in your office and without hearing the words out loud, your spirit man heard, Bobby, 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 right? Because the Lord was getting your attention. You were faced with 2 things. Okay. You were faced with fear or fact. Right? Fear or faith, fear or faith, fear, faith, or fact. Okay, fear or the fact of faith. Okay, like okay. Literally fear or the fact of faith. Okay, faith is the substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things not seen. Right? Because you had to make a decision in that moment. Was I going to listen to the wisdom insight that I asked for? Right? Or was through fear, was I going to keep trying to plow the field, right? You also shared another factor of listening. Blessed is a counsel, multitude of counsel, right? Mm-hmm. You also mentioned that I listened to the wisdom insight my wife Kay Lee shared with me and to stay with the company a little longer, right? Mm-hmm. But then I want you to talk about there's no fast track, right? That we can't expect, that you couldn't expect that, break down how through experiential lived out life, right? How by listening to the voice of wisdom and your expectation couldn't be, then that means tomorrow I'm going to see an instant, 10 more clients, right? So just break that down for other people who were in the early phases and why it's important to be not weary and well doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I use kind of an investment story.
Okay.
Because this is wide application to the audience, right? Okay. Everybody understands everybody can invest if they want to. And so when it comes to the aspect of building wealth, it's I use Proverbs, forgot what chapter and verse, but steady plotting brings prosperity. Hasty speculation brings poverty. Right? Did I say that right? Steady plotting brings prosperity. Hasty speculation brings poverty. And so when it comes to, you're kind of basically we're talking about the kind of the get rich quick thing. We want to get immediate return, immediate and fast return. And that's considered hasty speculation. Because we're looking for the big return. We're chasing for the dollar. We're looking for the big return. And just know, not just in scripture, but just in fact, is risk and reward go hand in hand. So the higher the reward, the return you're looking for, just know that inherently there's a lot more risk than if you're going for a low return. So savings account, low return, low risk, right? Flipping a home, high return, high risk, right? And then there's something somewhere in the middle. So we go by the steady plotting, brings prosperity. But that's where it's hard for the average person to grasp because we're not patient. We want everything now. That's why 80% of people carry a credit card balance, right? I just did some research on that because I'm doing I'm preaching at a church in Charlotte here, and we're going to talk about this. And so, 80% of people are in debt, right? Why? Because they can't wait to save to buy cash. They instead want to have it now, so they put it on credit or get a loan so they can have it now. And therefore, now you're spending more for the same product than if you just would have paid cash for it, right?
That's right. So there is no savings. I don't care. I remember my husband telling me years ago, Sean, things are always on sale. There's always going to be a sale, right?
Absolutely.
Be a sale.
Absolutely. So the patience part is really difficult for people. But when you are just patient and just keep persisting and consistently invest, that you're going to build wealth. Now, along the way, something could shoot up and you can make it big on a certain stock. But if that can't be your mentality. That I'm looking for that stock that's going to hit it big. I just want to just keep plodding away because I know that the stock market has provided on average over the course of its lifetime, over 100 years, about an 11% return. So if I would just look at a 10% return, right? I just tell my young entrepreneurs all the time is like, look, if you put $500 a month in, whether it's a mutual fund or your IRA or something, you put it away, invest it at 10% return a year, in 30 years, that is $1 million. And I didn't start out putting $500 a month, and I started out at $200. When my first job out of college, I was making 30 grand a year. So I put 200 grand in, or $200 in a month, into my 401k. But then as years progress, right, I make more money, and I just got into the habit of investing into myself. And then, next thing then I started opening up my own a separate mutual fund account. Then I started investing into some real estate. Over the course of time, I just did one extra thing at a time. Roughly every 5 years, I was adding one additional investment element in. I wasn't getting huge returns. I wasn't making a lot of money then, but I wasn't banking on that at the time because I had a good job. I was making money. So I wasn't banking on these investments to provide immediate returns. I was looking to sock it away, let it build. And as I get older, then I can reap those rewards, right? So anyways, but along the way, though, sometimes things hit big, and so a couple things did. And so, but people just can't be patient enough. They want that quick return. And so as they're chasing money, they end up losing too. And so that's why, because I remember saying this example a while back to a group of guys, $500 a month, $1 million in 30 years. It's like, well, you're going to need more than $1 million to retire. Yeah. And I said, okay, the average person retires with less than $200,000. So clearly people are living, right? And so even right now, if you were to retire to $1 million, that puts you in a 10% bracket, the upper 10%.
Yeah.
So for people to poo-poo that, obviously our people don't have that or don't have a path to $1 million. Because 90% don't. Yeah. And so I just laugh at that. I'm like, okay, maybe, but 90% of people don't retire with $1 million. And it doesn't mean you can't invest more money, right? I'm just giving you a benchmark. I said, hey, let's at least get that. So anyways, it goes into the patience part. when you're chasing a dollar, you're bound to make bad decisions. I've done that when I first started in real estate. I had my plan just to buy, at least a duplex and then rent it out, right? Just a very safe way of investing in my eyes. But then I got sucked into investing into these condos from someone I respected. But then, long story short, we got caught short. And my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, Kay Lee, but we're still dating, but she didn't think it was a good idea because she didn't have a good feeling about it. And I ended up investing anyway. And then, of course, it didn't go well. And so I lost a lot of money. And so I throw that in for a couple of reasons. One is, everything's a risk and you can still lose some money. But, again, going back to even the parable of the talent thing, there's always another opportunity to invest more. Yeah. And you can, and even with making mistakes, you can still be okay. And also listen to counsel, especially if you're married. When your wife has a feeling, you probably better listen.
Yeah. Yeah, those feelers. I'm telling you.
Yeah, but as men, we're looking at facts and figures, research, whatever, and we poo-poo feelings. But she's been right. And that wasn't the only time, and it costs a lot of money. And so now I listen to her feelings, which is different from emotions, right? We can go a whole thing about you don't invest based on emotions, but the feelings are different. It's more of a discernment kind of thing.
Yeah.
But emotions, you definitely don't want to invest based on emotions because that can steer you the wrong way.
Yeah. So even in this moment, and I would just encourage, because although this is a faith-based broadcast, okay, principles are principles. Okay, so even though initially one could say, which I don't appreciate this, one could say, you're nothing until you say yes to Jesus. I don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate that kind of thinking. And let me tell you why. Everybody, it says, let us create mankind in our image. Everybody's been created in the image of God. And that's why the Lord went on to say, He blesses the just and the unjust. There are principles and laws that the earth was founded upon to function as. And so you don't have, your prerequisite is not, in order to apply any of these principles that people are gathering from Sagionic, which is movement by movement through human time, right? And Sagion singular is carriers of wisdom. You don't have to say yes to Jesus in order to begin to follow the principles that are being taught here, right? It says, grace and glory, no good thing will He withhold to them who walk uprightly. It is the creator of the entire universe. It is His desire to bless you, right? There's a promise that says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. And so Robert, when he was in his office, he was being moved by the creator of the entire universe. Hey, bud, you're going to burn out. Your marriage is going to be jacked if you don't make a change. Your health is going to go south if you don't make a change, right? Yeah. And all of us could raise our hands, and this is going to lead into a question. All of us could raise our hands at any time we made a mistake, anytime there was some kind of accident. Majority, I'm going to say not every time. And there was this little voice inside of us that said, maybe that's not a good idea. And we ignored that voice.
Sure,
right?
Absolutely.
So, share, however you want to relate to this to help viewers to begin to walk under the umbrella of wisdom insight.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Sister Sean paints the whole scene first.
Yeah. So, follow Proverbs. Proverbs got a lot of great stuff on wisdom. So I would, wisdom is key, I think, and that's different from knowledge, right? So when I started mentoring these young entrepreneurs, I told them, I said, do you know the difference between wisdom and knowledge? And I said, basically, it's mistakes. Wisdom comes from making mistakes and learning from them, right? Some people don't learn, so they're just foolish. But people that are wise, you learn from your mistakes or learn from others. And I always like to learn from other people's mistakes, so I don't have to make them. But even so, I still made mistakes. It's like I shared the real estate stuff. But I said, knowledge is everywhere, especially with the internet. You can YouTube it, Google it, Chat GPT, whatever. There's all kinds of tools out there. Knowledge is everywhere. There's an abundance of knowledge. There's no shortage of knowledge. But what there's a shortage of is wisdom, because all these investment gurus or business gurus out there, right, are telling you, 5 steps to wealth or 5 steps to a better business, whatever. They never share about the mistakes that can be made. I said, so I told the guys, I said, ask me about the mistakes that were made, not just about the how to. And people don't listen enough to the mistakes. And there's one guy, he's just got his hell bent on this one way of investing. And I've shared one just based on my own mistakes, and not just mine, but others, how risky it is and just how bad it is. Now, can you make money off it? Yeah, absolutely. You can make money on anything, but you also got to understand the risks that are involved with all ways of investing or doing business or anything that you do, right? There's always a risk no matter what you do. And so the people don't listen and watch, observe the mistakes and learn from them are doomed to repeat them. Right? That's why there's common mistakes in investing. There's common mistakes in business. There's common mistakes in, buying your first home. There's all these common mistakes, and they're common because people don't, either because they just don't know about the potential mistakes, or they don't listen to those that have gone before them. And so I would say, just, as far from a wisdom standpoint, is look and start to observe whatever you're going to do in your life, or your career, business, ministry, whatever. Look at the mistakes that were made along the way. And also don't be, but at the same time, don't be afraid of making mistakes, because some people are, because they don't want to make a mistake, they don't move forward. They want to make sure everything's perfect before we really launch. I see that a lot of times in business, even in investing, is they want to have everything perfect before they launch their business. And I said, nothing's ever going to be perfect. So when are you going to start?
That's right.
There's no such thing as, I've worked for the biggest companies in the world. They weren't perfect. But guess what? Every year they just reevaluate what they've done. What went well? What didn't go well? What do we fix? What do we get rid of? They're constantly in the reevaluation mode, because they know they're not perfect. So there's always room for improvement. So whether you're going to say, I'll just use business for example. If you're thinking about launching a business, and you kind of gave an example a little earlier with the hair product, is you come up with the minimum viable product. They call it MVP, minimum viable product. Okay. What is the bare minimum thing you can produce to start to sell?
Okay.
And even if it's not formally selling, just even to test the market to see, is this, just talk to some friends and family. Would you be willing to buy something like this and test it out and then get feedback?
Okay.
Right. The feedback is important, especially in the early stages, is get feedback and then refine it, make it better, and then relaunch it or launch it formally. Right. So come up with a minimum viable product, or even if it's a service, minimum viable service that you can start to offer and get feedback on. Even if it's for free for now or something, right? Just get something out there and then get feedback on it, good and bad, and then listen for that. You gotta be able to receive that constructive criticism, because some people have a hard time with criticism with their product and service, and therefore they never get better because they don't listen to it. And I go, listen to your market. They're the ones that are going to purchase. So you should listen to them, right? Like, it's just like blows my mind sometimes. Like, they're not listening to their customer. I'm like, they're the ones that are going to buy. If you don't listen to them, guess what? They're not going to buy.
That's right.
And so, you just gotta be able to launch and move forward with imperfection, and then just refine and improve as you go. Always be coachable, always be learning, always be in method of improvement, but don't strive for perfection. But it's okay to keep improving, but don't strive for perfection, because you're never going to get there. But you can be in that mindset of always improving and providing a better product and a service for business. And even if you're working for somebody, right, you can always be upping your game as an employee to become better at what you do, to be able to then take the next step into a promotion or something like that. And I would definitely encourage, because some people might be even dissatisfied where they are right now, right, about their job or whatever, or even their business sometimes. And what happens is when you start to be dissatisfied, then you start to kind of coast. And that's bad, because scripture says, do your work unto the Lord, not unto men. So you think nobody's watching, but God's always watching. But also I would say that people can see when you're not giving your best, even when they're not looking over your shoulder. And I had that situation when I was, thinking about leaving the company, to do consulting. And so I was kind of coasting. I wasn't, the job was become easy for me, and it wasn't satisfied. There's a lot of changes that happened within the company, and I wasn't satisfied, and I was just kind of coasting along. And then I came across that scripture, like I've read it a lot, or I've heard it or read it a lot. But, sometimes in a moment when you're going through something, then all of a sudden it hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I should be working, right? And regardless of what my plans are, wherever I am, I have an obligation to do my best.
That's right.
And it was interesting. Within 2 weeks, I got like 2 promotional offers, right? And I'm like, is someone like reading my mail, just watching over me? Right. And I was like, that's interesting. So, you never know where the next opportunity is going to come from. So, if you're listening and if you're in that mode of dissatisfaction, whatever it is, it might be just, in a volunteer position, or it might just be at home, or it might not be connected to a business or career. But when you're dissatisfied, you tend to kind of coast, and you're waiting for the next opportunity. Going back to the parable of talent, sometimes you get not sometimes, all the time, you should be doing your best, because that'll open the doors for the next opportunity.
That's right. That's right. And to not discredit, not one human being is not better than the other, right? It's not like, oh, this person is the most amazing person ever, but this one is kind of sort of, we don't want to do that, because we just don't know. And I was thinking of it when you were talking. What's the last thing I wrote down? We would cover the no fast track, feedback. We covered that. So where do you want to take us? We've got 5 minutes left. Okay, what's the most? I want you to be able to walk away from this interview and know. Okay, first and foremost, I got to tell all of our viewers. So underneath this YouTube video, you're going to see the word more. When you click on the word more, right, there'll be all the contact information on how to get a hold of Robert and his wife Kay Lee Fukui. So you didn't talk about your podcast. Take us to your podcast.
Yep, Thriving in Tandem. So everything's tandem now. And our book is Tandem, the Married Entrepreneur's Guide for Greater Work-Life Balance. And then now our social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, and our YouTube channel, and our podcast is called Thriving in Tandem. So it should be pretty easy to find us.
And the book is right there behind you.
Yeah. So, yep. Here you go. And so the podcast is just based on kind of what we do. We want to help the married entrepreneur be able to win in all areas of life, their business, their marriage, but we talk into investments a little bit, talk about, just yourself, taking care of yourself. So, how I want to leave this, and kind of, you'll hear that in our podcast and even in our book, but there's a recipe for success that covers 4 areas, and you do this in priority. In priority, it's self, relationship, wealth, and business. So how well you do in those 4 areas, you should try and succeed. You should succeed in all 4 of those areas, but you want to prioritize yourself and family first, self and relationship first, because those are the 2 things that get the back seat. So that's why you got to start with self, because that's the last person we tend to take care of. We're serving so many people and serving other people, building a business, tending to our family, all that, and we get the last effort, right? And we got to take care of ourselves, just like, making sure you put the oxygen mask in the airplane before you help your kid, because if you're dead, you're not good to anybody. And so you become a better leader, son, daughter, husband, wife, when you take care of yourself, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. You got to do something on a daily basis to take care of those 4 things, because they're all interconnected.
That's right.
If one area of that it goes bad, it affects all the other 3 areas.
That's right. That's right.
right? When your spiritual walk is unhealthy, it's going to affect you in all the other three areas. And physically, when you're unhealthy, it's going to affect you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, right?
Absolutely.
So all I'll say is any of those areas that get out of whack, it's going to affect the others. And so you want to be a whole person so you can be a better person, and you're also better to be around.
Hello.
And then of course your relationship. And then the wealth building is just investing. It's having your money grow and work for you, whether it's in real estate or the mutual funds, 401k, right? It doesn't require a lot of work for me. We just put money in and we let it grow.
Yeah.
But people think wealth is like having to work a lot and getting one side hustle after another. And all that does is drive you nuts.
That's right.
In my observation. And so those three areas, self, relationship, and wealth building, doesn't take a lot of time. And it still leaves you a lot of time to build your business. But people think that it takes more time. We overestimate how much time it takes to build all these areas. And therefore, we say we got to take all our time into our business or our career or whatever, our ministry, right? But in reality, it really doesn't take as much time as you think. But you got to prioritize the other three first: self, relationship, and wealth, just to do, and then, build your business. So, my daily practice is roughly about an hour and a half, quiet time, and then, reading time, my Bible, and then prayer time. And of course, then pray with Kay Lee, and then do my walk with the dog. Right. So that takes care of pretty much all of those areas. I mean, all those areas in just one shoot. And people think, oh, I don't have time. But the reality is we waste more time in the day than that hour and a half.
That's
and
right.
I can pull up people's phones. Some people's phones, I can just look on their phones and see where they spent their time and can find an hour and a half. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if you're not consistent, even if you're not 100% of the time, it's not 7 days a week. I'm just, gung ho, but I'm 90% of the time I'm there. So that was where I would leave people at, is self, relationship, your wealth, and your business or your career, whatever provides the income for you. Make sure those first three you're dealing with, you're prioritizing, and it doesn't take as much time as you think. It's just being about intentional with the time that you have and pouring into yourself and your family on a regular basis.
That's right. Because truth be told, we're all given the same 24 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
The same 24 hours. And my little wisdom insight commercial. We'll let Robert share information he knows about this, but every day we're given a Proverbs, right? There's 31 Proverbs in the Bible. Okay. So today you can choose. Today's the 14th of March, right? Let's say today you're going to choose, I'm going to read the Proverbs of the day. In the Bible, there's 31 chapters, right? You're an image bearer. I also want you to take your hand as an act of activation, and point to yourself and say, I am created in the image of the great I am. And the more you look in the mirror and the more you say that, by the time you get to the 10th time, it's going to sound like this. I am created in the image of the great I am, right? Well, the great I am spoke creation into existence. I'm living in Oregon and I'm not falling off because the great I am created gravity, right? Robert's in California, and in our Bible, it says, who told the waves they could only go so far, right? So this gives, the Proverbs of the day gives you access to tap into the omniscient mind of the Lord God Almighty. So I want to leave our viewers with that. All the information on how to get a hold of Robert. Look up his podcast. You guys, come on. These guys are a hoot. These guys are amazing. Kaylee's my best friend. I'm telling you. Look, because her and I are like, our brains were created. That's why God put me in Oregon and her in California, right? Because there needed to be distance between our brains, right?
Yeah.
And so you look back a couple of days ago and see when I interviewed his bride, and then next week, it's going to come onto the scene that I interviewed Team Fukui, and you guys will be able to tap into the dual brain of the fluidity of they two shall become one flesh. So thank you, Robert. I appreciate your time. Looking forward to who are the carriers of wisdom that Robert's going to refer to, Sagionic 1027. So
Bless you, Sean.
Yep. I want to thank all of our viewers for coming to this episode of Sagionic 1027. And until our next broadcast and our next guest, may the Lord bless you, May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon thee always. Blessings. Bye.